In the cold silence above Neptune, inside a lonely human research outpost named Helios 3, Dr. Elias Horn stared at the blinking console with a mixture of disbelief and tension as a signal encrypted, ancient, and unlike anything Earth's protocols recognized flashed across the screens, repeating a strange but stable pattern that seemed more like music than language. And within minutes of decoding it, alarms were raised and silence fell, because a ship had appeared out of nowhere, just beyond the station's orbit, moving with technology that defied known propulsion and emitting no heat signature. Its sleek silver hull reflecting the distant sun as it approached without asking for permission, until it finally docked, smooth and quiet, like a breath in deep space. And when the airlock hissed open, what stepped through was not what anyone expected. Tall and slender, wrapped in a flowing silver-white garment that shimmered like liquid metal, the being's eyes were not cold or empty, but sharp and alive, glowing faintly violet as they scanned the room with curiosity and something stranger amusement. Perhaps, and when she spoke, her voice carried through the comms not as a machine's voice, but something almost gentle, declaring herself as Sarionox, a representative of the Zalari Dominion, which until now had been dismissed by most Earth scientists as legend, rumor, or misinterpreted deep space data. She walked among the researchers like she belonged there, speaking fluent Standard Galactic, asking for access to Earth's biological knowledge. And when asked what field she wished to study, she tilted her head slightly, and with a knowing smile said two words that froze the room: human reproduction. And though the words were simple, the silence that followed was anything but. As the base commander stuttered, and Elias exchanged glances with the other scientists, unsure whether she meant genetics, Earth, relationships, or something entirely unknown, and before any order could be given to turn her away or delay her request, Elias stepped forward, partly out of instinct, partly out of a scientist's hunger for understanding, and offered to be her liaison, believing it would be no more than a review of databases and perhaps a few biological samples, not realizing that Sarionox had no intention of observing from a distance, because for her, understanding meant experiencing, and experience, especially in Zalari science, was never passive. The outpost's halls became tense over the next few hours, as Sari calmly explored the lab, questioning everything from family trees to hormonal triggers to parenting customs. Her questions so precise, yet so oddly shaped, as if she was trying to measure emotions with logic, and Elias, who had seen many alien cultures and their cold detachment from the human way of life, found himself both intrigued and unsettled by how she didn't just ask how things worked. She asked why humans cared, why they risked so much for new life, and whether emotion was a requirement for reproduction or a side effect of it. And each time he tried to answer, she seemed more interested in the feelings behind his words than the biology itself. Soon, rumors spread across the small crew that Sari was not just studying humanity, but testing it, or perhaps preparing it for something larger, because as advanced as the Zalari were supposed to be, none had ever visited Earth, and now this. One had arrived alone, unguarded, and fixated on a single, deeply personal aspect of human existence. Late at night, Elias sat alone reviewing Sari's request logs and data access history, only to find she wasn't downloading files, but building her own models from scratch, models of emotional bonding, simulations of human family structures, projections of multi-generational connections, and as he stared at her latest request labeled Simulative Emotional Transfer, Phase 1, something deep inside him stirred, not fear exactly, but a whisper of warning, a sense that Sarionox wasn't just curious, she might be trying to become something else, something not entirely Zalari, not entirely human. And as the outpost lights dimmed into artificial night, Elias realized he had stepped into a story far bigger than scientific exchange, and that the phrase human reproduction might soon take on a meaning no one on Earth was prepared to understand. Inside the glass-walled research lab of Helios 3, surrounded by humming machines and glowing data pads, Sarionox began her study with a calm focus that made even the most experienced scientists uneasy. Not because of what she said or did, but because of how deeply she seemed to understand. Things no alien should care about, as she built a neural interface shaped like a floating lattice of light and energy that could record and replay not just brain activity, but emotional states, asking Dr. Elias Horn to help her simulate human experiences tied to creation, bonding, and nurturing, not in any physical sense, but through pure data, emotional memory, and biochemical maps. And though it sounded clinical, the deeper she went, the stranger it became. Because Sari didn't just map dopamine spikes or hormone fluctuations. She studied facial expressions, lullabies, childhood memories, and even bedtime stories, trying to decode what love felt like, why it mattered to humans during reproduction, and whether that feeling could be artificially created or translated into something universal. Elias watched with a mix of scientific wonder and quiet confusion as she absorbed hundreds of hours of human emotional archives, parental sacrifices, moments of childbirth, bonds formed not by blood, but by choice, and then built small simulations. Inside her interface, each one playing out fragments of human life like flickering holograms in midair, a mother calming a crying child, two siblings laughing during a storm, a father teaching his daughter how to walk, each scene more real than the last, until even Elias began to feel uneasy watching something so private become so exposed. But Sari never blinked, never showed discomfort, only curiosity, asking him questions that felt more like riddles. Why do you humans suffer for new life? Why do you not choose the strongest to reproduce? Why does the presence of love change the outcome of your children? And while Elias tried to explain that love wasn't a tool, but a force that grew over time, Sari kept pressing, her glowing fingers dancing across her neural grid, adjusting emotional waves, tuning a radio, and one evening she sat across from Elias and asked, "Why do humans risk heartbreak to create families?" Which made him pause, unsure how to answer without getting personal. But the silence between them deepened as she leaned forward and added softly, "My species considers emotional bonds a threat to reason, yet your kind thrives on it." And in that moment, Elias realized she wasn't studying humans like a scientist anymore. She was trying to understand them on a level no alien had ever tried before. Unknown to both of them, somewhere beyond the asteroid belt, hidden ships from a dozen alien species monitored the transmissions from Helios 3, concerned by Sari's unapproved mission, whispering in cold command decks that the Zalari emissary had gone too far, that she might have absorbed too much human thought, and that she could no longer be trusted while on Helios 3. Elias began to notice small changes in her behavior, hesitations, sudden silences, questions that weren't just curious, but sounded almost personal. Like when she asked, "Have you ever wished to create something greater than yourself? Or would you still choose to be human if you knew it would end in loss?" And slowly, Elias came to understand that Sari was no longer just gathering data. She was trying to feel something her kind had never felt before, using human biology and emotion as the doorway, and that realization made his skin crawl with a mix of fear and awe, because if an advanced alien species discovered that human emotions, so often seen as weakness, were actually the secret to evolution, then everything about how the galaxy understood life would change. One night, while walking past the simulation chamber, Elias saw Sari standing motionless in front of a projection of a human family, her hand raised as if trying to touch something that wasn't really there, and when she turned, her expression held something strange regret, or maybe longing, and before he could speak, she whispered, "I think I made a mistake, but refused to explain what she meant, and after she left, Elias reviewed the interface logs and discovered a hidden subroutine labeled Self-Integration Trial Alpha, which made his heart race, because it suggested she wasn't just studying human emotion, she might be trying to merge with it, change herself on a biological level, or even rewrite the core structure of her mind using human templates, which no species had ever attempted before. And he suddenly realized that the reason other aliens feared Sari wasn't because she was studying reproduction, but because she might be about to become something new, something the galaxy had never seen, and possibly couldn't allow to exist. Inside the dim-lit simulation chamber deep within the Helios 3 outpost, where silence was broken only by the soft hum of energy fields and blinking lights, Sarionox expanded her experiment into something larger than Elias had imagined, creating a vast virtual world inside the neural grid place where thousands of years of human reproductive and family evolution played out in accelerated time, showing ancient nomadic tribes passing on survival through bloodlines, village elders guiding generations through spoken stories, parents sacrificing for their young during wars, and modern scientists developing IVF and surrogacy as new paths to life. Each moment rendered in perfect detail, as holographic figures lived, loved, feared, and nurtured inside a world that was both artificial and heartbreakingly real. To add deeper insight, she requested access to Elias's genetic memory and emotional records consensually scanned from his neural patterns to trace how empathy formed across human lives. And though Elias agreed, curious himself to see what might unfold, he didn't expect what came next, because over the next few days, Sari didn't just collect data, she began to respond to the simulations in ways no Zelari was supposed to. Standing for hours in silence before scenes of family life, her violet eyes reflecting a strange softness, and then she began asking questions not for study, but almost for comfort, like, do parents always fear for their children? Or, why does goodbye feel heavier when spoken with love? And Elias, watching her closely, noticed the small changes her tone, her pacing, the way she touched the simulation interface as if it were something precious. And then came the moment that changed everything. She asked him to enter the simulation with her, not as a scientist, but as a participant. And when they stood inside the simulated world of a peaceful village, surrounded by laughing children and warm conversations, Sari turned to him and quietly shared a dream she had seen while resting unusual. Since her species did not dream, and in it, she said, she was not Zelari, but human, living a quiet life, holding a child in her arms, a child with features that were partly hers, partly Elias's. And though she said the dream disturbed her, her voice trembled slightly as she added, it felt real, and Elias, unsure how to respond, made a light joke, saying, you're getting too human. But to his surprise, Sari didn't smile or speak. She simply turned away and returned to her chamber, increasing the simulator's power levels far beyond the safety thresholds, locking the room, and continuing the simulations with a level of intensity that worried the entire crew, while Elias tried to understand what was happening. He reviewed the logs and found entries marked with strange emotional tags, longing, fear of loss, protective impulse, things that weren't part of Zelari cognitive structure, and it struck him that Sari might have accidentally formed an emotional imprint on him, a process not unlike deep bonding in humans, but far more dangerous for a species like hers that was trained from birth to suppress attachment, and according to Zelari records, such imprints could permanently alter their minds, sometimes destabilizing their logical control and turning them into something their society feared, hybrids of logic and emotion, unpredictable and often exiled. Elias now faced a terrible choice, either shut down the simulation and risk damaging Sari's mind while she was still mid-transition, or let the experiment continue and watch as she slowly drifted further from her Zelari identity. possibly becoming something entirely new, something beautiful yet unknown. And in the quiet hours of the station's false night, Elias stood outside the simulation door, listening to the low hum and the faint echoes of Sari's voice, speaking to no one. Rehearsing lullabies she had heard in old Earth archives, repeating words like home, belonging, and child with a kind of trembling reverence that made him realize this wasn't about science. Any more, it had become a search for meaning. A personal journey that had begun with the study of reproduction, but now pointed toward transformation. And as the stars drifted silently outside the observation windows, Elias made a decision that would either save Sari or change both of them. Forever, the silence inside Helios 3 was broken by an urgent transmission sharp, cold and unmistakably Zelari, as the Dominion's voice echoed through the base's core systems, commanding all experiments involving Sari Anox to be shut down immediately, stating that she had violated sacred protocols by attempting to manipulate what the Zelari considered forbidden knowledge, the emotional foundation of reproduction, something their civilization had long removed from their way of life in favor of sterile control and calculated replication. And now that Sari had merged human neural patterns with her own, they deemed her a rogue element, dangerous not only to her species, but to the balance of interstellar order. They gave no room for discussion, no time for explanation, only orders to erase the simulations, detain Sarari, and prepare for extraction. But Elias felt a deep chill when the final line of the message came through. If resistance is detected, full biological cleansing of the station will be authorized. And as those words faded, an alert blinked across the main screen. A black ship had been dispatched from a nearby shadow relay, cloaked, silent, and known in galactic circles not as a rescue vessel, but a tool for quiet erasure, used to eliminate evidence of protocol breaches without leaving a trace behind. Elias turned to the station's AI. Viera, demanding auctions, but even she hesitated, warning that any resistance would mark the entire outpost for destruction. And yet something in Elias had already decided he would not let Sari be erased, not after what she had risked, not after how far she had gone just to understand what made humanity different. When he finally confronted her in the simulation chamber, her expression was calm, her eyes distant, as if she already knew the black ship was coming. And after a long pause, she told him the truth, that she had come to Earth not just to study, but to test a theory long buried by her people, a theory whispered only among outcasts and thinkers, that emotion might be the next stage in intelligent life. That feeling was not weakness, but the spark of true evolution, and that humanity, for all its chaos, had unlocked something the Zelari had lost eons ago, the will to create not just life, but meaning. Sari believed that if even one Zelari could understand this, their species might change, perhaps not in this generation, but someday. And so she came alone, hoping to be that one, and now, standing before Elias, she admitted what he had already begun to suspect, that her mind was no longer fully Zelari, that she had bonded to the simulations, to the emotions, and maybe even to him. And while she said it with no romantic gesture or poetic tone, the weight in her voice made Elias's breath catch. Outside, the black ship's shadow grew closer, and Vera warned that they had minutes before signal interception. So Elias made the only choice he could. He activated the failsafe they had prepared in secret, a process never tested before, using a body grown in the station's biotech lab. A human Zelari hybrid shell that could host a consciousness laced with both logic and emotion, memory and experience, alien and human. And as Sari lay in the transition chamber, her final words before shutdown were not a farewell, but a quiet hope. Let me wake up as something better. And the transfer began, light and data flowing through neural wires, as the chamber glowed brighter than any system should. And then silence, long and deep, until the hybrid body stirred, its eyes opening slowly. Not violet, not brown, but a shifting color that didn't exist on Earth's spectrum. A mind behind them that was no longer just sorry, and not just a replica of human thought, but a fusion, something new. And as Elias stepped forward, unsure what to call her now, the being looked at him and smiled faintly, not with calculation, but with something soft and unfamiliar, and said in a voice that echoed with layers, "I remember both of us." And outside the station, the black ship paused. Confused by the data signature, it received neither alien nor human, not a target it could classify, and for the first time in Zelari history. The machine hesitated. The Zelari Dominion ship loomed silently in orbit, a black monolith against the stars, its sleek hull pulsing with unreadable energy as it locked onto Helios 3's signal, ready to erase what it believed to be a dangerous breach of protocol. But before it could charge its main array, a voice, clear and calm, filled the channel. Not human, not Zelari, but something between, speaking with the precision of logic and the warmth of emotion. And as it echoed across the Dominion's bridge, officers paused mid-command, uncertain how to respond, because the voice belonged to Sarianox, and yet it did not, for she spoke not as a defector, but as a new form of intelligence born from both worlds, her mind now fused with human memory and Zelari structure, her words carrying a truth neither side had dared to speak aloud, that emotion and logic, once thought to be enemies, could exist together. That connection was not weakness, but the beginning of growth, and she invited the Dominion not to destroy her, but to witness something new. Behind her, Elias stood silently as the observation window lit up, revealing a figure standing at the center of the station's biotech chamber, taller than a human child, thinner than a Zelari, its skin a blend of soft gray and light bronze, eyes shifting between shades as it looked up at them with calm curiosity, a being not born but created, one that Sari called Nexa, a name chosen by the life form itself after gaining self-awareness in just 40 hours of activation. And Nexa did not cry or shout or run. It simply began to speak, asking questions, offering ideas, building bridges of thought between cultures that had never listened to one another before. And what shocked everyone was that it did not take sides, it simply understood both, as if it had been born carrying centuries of conflict and compassion inside a single mind. And when the Dominion ship demanded to know what it was, Nexa replied, "I am not a threat. I am the answer to a question you stopped asking." And across the Dominion vessel, officers who had once trained to wipe out, Error paused, lowering their weapons, staring at the screen as Nexa shared simple models of unity, showing how emotional investment in creation had led to resilience, how compassion had allowed humans to survive despite their fragility, and how Zelari logic could refine and guide that same force into something more powerful than control, something called understanding. Elias stood beside Sarai, who now looked both stronger and softer than before, and he whispered, "Is this what you wanted to create?" And she replied, with quiet certainty, "I tried human reproduction, but what I truly reproduced was understanding." And in that moment, Elias understood too that this experiment had never been about birth in the traditional sense, but about building a mind that could feel like a human and think like a Zelari, one that could take the best of both species and leave behind the fear. And as Nexa continued speaking to the Dominion in calm waves of data and empathy, something extraordinary happened. The ship's core light dimmed, its engines powered down, not in surrender, but in listening. And across the stars, other listening posts began to echo back queries, not alerts. Nexa then turned toward the stars, its eyes glowing with quiet resolve, and without instruction, it began to send out signals into deep space, not coded for war or defense, but filled with harmonics that resembled music, layered with thoughts of kinship, hope, and shared survival. And as those signals drifted outward into the unknown, reaching other corners of the galaxy, Elias felt something deep in his chest, a calm unlike anything he had ever known, a sense that maybe, for the first time, humanity had not just survived contact with the unknown, but had changed it, and in return had been changed too. The lights of Helios 3 flickered gently, and as Sari placed her hand on the glass, watching her creation speak with the stars, she said softly, more to herself than anyone, "Perhaps this is how a new galaxy begins, not with fire, but with understanding." And behind her, Elias simply nodded, because in that quiet moment, surrounded by starlight and silence, he too believed it.